Heracles, or more commonly known today as Hercules, is one of the most recognisable names from Greek mythology. Whilst Heracles features in countless myths, many of his greatest achievements came as part of his battle for atonement, a series of feats better known as the 12 Labours of Hercules. So what were these mighty deeds, and were they really that impressive? Let's find out together. Before exploring the infamous 12 Labours of Heracles, it is important to understand why he was compelled to undertake such a dangerous task. And as is common in Greek mythology, the background is a tragic one. To understand Heracles, we must go back to his birth. The son of mighty Zeus, Heracles, however, was not a true god, owing to his mortal mother, Alcmene. The perhaps unsurprising infidelity of Zeus naturally enraged his godly wife Hera, who upon learning that her husband had fathered a child with another woman, a mortal no less, was enraged. Hera was vengeful and hated Heracles because he reminded her of her unfaithful husband. Hera tried to kill Heracles as an infant, sending snakes into his crib to poison him. Despite his mortal mother, Heracles was still a demigod and thus possessed immense strength, which he used to effortlessly strangle the snakes that Hera had sent into his crib. Her plot had failed, but she would not forget so easily. Hera bided her time, waiting patiently in the shadows until Heracles grew into a man. He married and had many sons. Seeing how desperately Heracles loved his wife and children, she determined now was the best time to strike and take her revenge. She sent a madness upon Heracles that poisoned his mind and drove him unknowingly to murder his entire family. Upon regaining his senses, Heracles realized what he had done and was devastated, overcome with grief and pain. Desperate to atone for his sins, he turned to the god Apollo for guidance and was told that he would need to serve King Eurystheus for 10 years, performing whatever labours the king might demand of him. Heracles despaired at this, loathing to serve a man whom he knew to be far inferior to himself, yet fearing to oppose his father Zeus. Eventually, he placed himself at the king's disposal. Hera, still determined to eradicate Heracles from the world, suggested to the king that he order Heracles to fulfill 10 impossible labours. Hera believed that Heracles would die attempting to complete these labours, which would finally eradicate him from the world. Only 10 labours, I hear you ask? I thought there were 12. Good spot. We'll come on to that later. With his task set and the pain of his lost family still fresh in his mind, Heracles set to work as determined as ever to atone for his sins. The first labour is perhaps one of the most well known, the slaying of the mighty Nemean lion. Setting off on his journey, Heracles stopped in a nearby town where he met a young boy who told him that if Heracles slew the Nemean lion and returned alive within 30 days, the town would sacrifice a lion to Zeus. But if he did not return within 30 days, or if he died, the boy would sacrifice himself to Zeus, as if he didn't have enough pressure on him already. Whilst searching for the lion, Heracles fletched some arrows to use against it, not knowing that its golden fur was impenetrable. When he found and shot the lion, firing at it with his bow, he discovered the fur's protective property as the arrow bounced harmlessly off the creature's thigh. After some time, Heracles made the lion return to his cave. The cave had 2 entrances, one of which Heracles blocked. He then entered the other. In those dark and close quarters, Heracles stunned the beast with his club and, using his immense strength, strangled it to death. After slaying the lion, he tried to skin it with a knife from his belt, but failed. He then tried sharpening the knife with a stone, and even tried with the stone itself. Finally, Athena, noticing the hero's plight, told Heracles to use one of the lion's own claws to skin the pelt that some stories claim became part of his armour. When he returned on the 30th day, carrying the carcass of the lion on his shoulders, the king was amazed and terrified. He forbade him ever again to enter the city. From then on, he was to display the fruits of his labours outside the city gates. The king would then tell Heracles his tasks through a herald, not personally. He even had a large bronze jar made for him in which to hide from Heracles if need be. The king then warned him that the tasks would become increasingly difficult. True to his word, the second labour the king tasked was to slay the Lernaean Hydra. A Hydra that, to make matters worse, had been specifically raised by Hera with the sole purpose of killing Heracles. The Lernaean Hydra was a fearsome monster that lived in the swamp of the Lake Lerna. The Hydra had 9 heads, one of which was immortal, and the rest were mortal. The swamp was covered in a poisonous mist, so upon his arrival, Heracles put a cloth on his mouth and nose. To lure the Hydra out of his lair, the hero shot flaming arrows, achieving his intent. However, when he chopped one of the Hydra's heads, he realised in horror that 2 new heads would spring back. At that point, the hero felt hopeless, so he asked for the help of his nephew, Iolaus. Iolaus, probably advised by the goddess Athena, who favoured the hero, thought of an idea and put it into action. As soon as Heracles would chop one of the monster's heads, Iolaus would cauterize the stump with a firebrand. The plan was successful. No more heads would appear. Hera, angry that her side was losing the battle, sent a huge crab to distract Heracles, which he simply squashed under his foot. When it was time for the immortal head to be cut off, Heracles took a golden sword that Athena gave him, and using the same technique, the 2 heroes managed to kill the monster. Before Heracles left, he dipped his arrows in the poisonous blood of the Hydra, one of which he later used to kill the centaur Nessus. This poison would also lead to Heracles' own demise, but that is a story for another day. Hera turned her slain monster into the constellation of the same name, while she transformed the crab into the constellation Cancer. Upon returning victorious, however, the king did not count the success of killing the Hydra as one of the labours, using as an excuse the fact that Heracles was helped by Iolaus. In their effort to mark an end to Heracles' successes, the king and Hera decided that the next task Heracles should do would be to capture the Ceryneian Hind. This was a sacred deer belonging to the goddess Artemis and had golden antlers and hooves of bronze. It was believed that it was so fast that it could outrun a flying arrow. Heracles made a real effort to track the animal. When he saw it, he followed it for a whole year through the lands of Greece, Thrace, Istria, and the land of Hyperboreans. According to one version of the myth, he managed to capture the hind while it was sleeping. On his way back, Artemis and her twin brother Apollo appeared in front of Heracles. This task had been given by the king, thinking that Heracles would cause the anger of the goddess and that she would punish him. However, when she appeared in front of him, Heracles asked for forgiveness, explaining to her that this was part of his penance for killing his wife and children. He also told her he would return the hind to her as soon as he showed it to the king. Artemis accepted his apology and let him go. When he returned to the king's court, the king told Heracles that the animal now belonged to him. Not forgetting his promise to the goddess, Heracles tricked Eurystheus, telling him that he should take the animal himself and bring it to the palace. When the king came out to take the deer, the hero let it go, and the animal ran back to Artemis. Heracles simply said to the king that he had not been quick enough. The Erymanthian boar was a giant animal living on Mount Erymanthus, which was dedicated to the goddess Artemis as well. The king thought that capturing this beast would be the perfect task that would lead to the hero's death. Heracles set forth on his journey to the mountain, but decided to stop by his friend's place, Pholus, a kind centaur. After eating together, Heracles asked his friend to open a jug of wine that he had, which attracted the other centaurs to Pholus's dwelling. Not knowing that wine was supposed to be watered down before being consumed, the centaurs quickly became drunk and attacked Heracles. The hero killed most of them by shooting his poisonous arrows against them. The centaurs that remained fled to the cave of Chiron, the wisest of the centaurs. Pholus did not understand why these arrows were so lethal. Out of curiosity, he picked one up, but it fell on his foot and poisoned him as well. Another version has it that one of the arrows mistakenly hit Chiron. Although Chiron, being immortal, did not die, he could still feel an insufferable pain. Not able to withstand it, the wise centaur asked to be rid of the pain, exchanging his immortality, as well as taking the place of the Titan Prometheus, who was bound on top of a mountain, and his liver was being eaten daily by an eagle. Zeus accepted the exchange. Heracles then killed the eagle with one of his arrows, stopping the torture for Chiron. Chiron advised Heracles how to catch the Erymanthian boar. He told him that it would be very easy if the hero lured the boar into thick snow. Heracles followed Chiron's advice and captured the boar in no time. He then returned to the king, who upon seeing the creature was so scared that he hid himself in the large jar and asked Heracles to get rid of the animal. The fourth labour was complete. The fifth labour was to clean the stables of King Augean. This assignment was intended to be both humiliating and impossible, since these divine livestock were immortal and had produced an enormous quantity of dung. The stables of the king had never been cleaned in 30 years, and Eurystheus asked Heracles to clean them within a day. When Heracles reached Augeas' court, he asked for 1/10 of the cattle if he managed to clean the stables in a day. The king agreed. The hero managed to complete the task by diverting the rivers Alpheus and Peneus to pass through the stables and wash them out. Augeas refused to pay Heracles, and the hero took him to court, where he managed to win his claim, backed by Augeas' son, Phyleus. However, Phyleus and Heracles were both banished by the king before the court had ruled. Furious, Heracles returned to Elis, killed Augeas, and handed the throne to his son Phyleus. This is where he was said to have founded the Olympic Games. Although Heracles was successful, Eurystheus did not count it as a success, saying that it was the rivers that had done the work for him, and that he had accepted payment for it. 7 still to go though. The king's next task to Heracles was to kill the Stymphalian birds, large flying monsters that ate humans with their bronze beaks. Their wings were made of metallic feathers that could be thrown against their prey, while their dung was highly poisonous. We are starting to see a real dung-based theme emerging here, aren't we? They belonged to the god of war Ares and lived in the area of the Lake Stymphalia, where they bred quickly and took over the countryside, destroying local crops, fruit trees and townspeople. Heracles was unable to go too deep into the swamp, as he would eventually drown. Athena therefore helped him by providing him with a rattle. The sound the rattle produced scared the birds and made them fly from their hiding place. While in the air, they were an easy target for Heracles, who shot many of them down with his poisonous arrows. The remaining birds flew away to plague other lands. In fact, they were later encountered by the Argonauts. The 7th task the king gave to Heracles was to capture the Cretan bull. This was a legendary creature that wreaked havoc on the island of Crete, destroying crops and land. After getting permission from King Minos, Heracles managed to catch the bull with his bare hands and sent it back to the king's court. Upon seeing the creature, Eurystheus hid in his jar and decided to sacrifice the animal to Hera. The goddess rejected the offer, as this would glorify Heracles' success even more. Instead, the animal was left free and went to the area of Marathon, getting the name Marathonian bull. It was later caught by Theseus and was sacrificed to Athena and Apollo. On to the 8th labour. The mares of Diomedes were fearsome animals that had been trained to eat human flesh. They were owned by Diomedes, king of Thrace. It was believed that due to their unnatural diet, the horses were seized with madness, uncontrollable, and sometimes they even breathed fire. According to one source, Heracles brought a number of young men with him to help him with this task. After they managed to steal the animals, they were all chased by Diomedes and his army. Heracles told his companion Abderus to take care of the horses while he was fighting Diomedes. Upon his return, Heracles realized that Abderus had been devoured by the mares. Overcome with anger, Heracles fed Diomedes to his own horses and later founded the city of Abdera in memory of his friend. After the horses had been fed, they became calm, and Heracles seized the opportunity to bind their mouths shut. He brought them back to the king, who either sacrificed them to Hera or left them to roam free, as they had now become permanently calm. Admete, the daughter of Eurystheus, learned that Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, had been given a girdle as a gift from her father Ares and wanted it for herself. So the king decided to make this the 9th labour that Heracles would have to complete. Heracles took some friends with him and set sail for the region of Themyscira, where the Amazons dwelled. On their way there, they stopped at the island of Paros, where the sons of King Minos of Crete killed 2 of Heracles' friends. Furious, Heracles killed the sons of Minos and demanded that 2 of the inhabitants replace his dead comrades. Thus, 2 of Minos' grandsons joined the band, and they all set sail again. After a brief stop at the court of Lycus, a friend of Heracles, they eventually reached the land of the Amazons. Hippolyta had heard of the glorious feats that Heracles had performed, and impressed, she immediately agreed to give her girdle. Heracles asked her to have lunch together on the ship, and Hippolyta eagerly followed. At the same time, however, a disguised hero went to the Amazons and started spreading rumours about Heracles wanting to abduct their queen. The Amazons decided to confront Heracles and rowed towards the ship. Upon seeing them, Heracles thought that this had all been set up by Hippolyta and that she had no intention of handing over the girdle, so he killed her, took the belt, and set sail back to the king. The 10th labour of Heracles was to steal the cattle of Geryon, who lived on the island of Erythea, somewhere in the west. Heracles went on his quest, and he first had to cross the desert of Libya. At some point, having been so frustrated at the heat, he shot an arrow at the sun. Helios, the sun god, was so impressed by Heracles' courage that he decided to help him by offering him his own golden chariot, with which he sailed across the sea from west to east every night. Heracles hopped on the chariot and reached Erythea overnight. There, his first obstacle was the two-headed dog Orthrus, brother of Cerberus, the three-headed dog and guardian of the underworld. One blow with Heracles' club was enough to kill the dog. Eurytion, the herdsman, heard what happened, and when he tried to confront Heracles, he was killed in the same way. Geryon immediately grabbed his 3 shields and 3 spears, while wearing 3 helmets, and attacked the hero. However, a powerful shot of an arrow from Heracles' bow was enough to pierce Geryon's forehead and sent him to his demise. Bringing the cattle back to the king was another task on its own. According to the Roman version of the story, Heracles took the road over the Aventine hill where Rome would later be built on. There, a giant named Cacus stole some of the cattle, but they were later retrieved, called out by the animals remaining in the possession of Heracles. As an extra obstacle, Hera sent a gadfly to irritate the animals and scatter them. Heracles managed to get them back within a year. Before he reached Tiryns, though, Hera caused a flood that raised the level of a river so much that it could not be crossed. So, Heracles started piling stones into the river and bridged the 2 riverbanks. He eventually reached the king, where the cattle were sacrificed to the goddess. Despite completing 10 labours, the disqualification of 2 of them for outside help and accepting payment meant that 2 labours remained for Heracles. The first additional labour was to steal 3 of the golden apples from the garden of Hesperides. Hesperides were nymphs of the sunset that tended a garden somewhere in the far western corner of the world. Heracles managed to capture the Old Man of the Sea, a shape-shifting sea deity, in order to find out the exact location of the garden. During this quest, Heracles also confronted the half-giant Antaeus, who was invincible by drawing power from his mother, Gaia, the earth, as long as he touched it. To kill him, Heracles held him high so his feet wouldn't touch the ground and crushed him with his hands. There are 2 versions of how Heracles managed to acquire the apples. One version has it that he reached the garden where he killed Ladon, the dragon guardian of the apples, and simply took them. According to another, more complicated version, he came across Atlas, the Titan god who was condemned to hold the heavens on his shoulders. Atlas was also the father of the Hesperides, and thus had access to the garden at any time. Heracles persuaded Atlas to change places for a while so that Atlas would fetch some of the apples. Atlas agreed, and indeed took some of the apples. However, on his return, he decided he did not want to take the heavens back on his shoulders. Heracles tricked him, and he said he would be keeping the heavens, but wanted to just adjust his cloak first. Atlas agreed to take the heavens back momentarily, but Heracles simply walked away, taking the apples with him. The final labour that Heracles had to complete was to capture Cerberus, the 3-headed dog and guardian of the underworld. Before going to the underworld, Heracles decided to be initiated in the Eleusinian mysteries, so that he would be taught how to travel alive from the world of the living to the realm of the dead, and vice versa. He then went to Taenarium, where one of the entrances to the underworld lay, and was helped there by Athena and Hermes. The goddess Hestia also helped him with negotiating with Charon, the boatman that guided the souls over the river towards the underworld. Once he reached the underworld, he met Theseus and Pirithous, the 2 heroes that had been incarcerated in the underworld by Hades for attempting to steal Persephone. According to one version of the story, snakes coiled around their legs and then turned into stone. A different version has it that the god of the underworld feigned hospitality and invited them to a feast. However, the chairs on which the heroes were seated magically caused forgetfulness, thus keeping them there. Heracles pulled Theseus from his chair, managing to save him. However, part of his thigh was stuck to it, thus providing an explanation for the supposedly lean thighs of the Athenians. When the hero tried to save Pirithous, though, the earth started trembling. It seems that because he desired Persephone for himself, it was so insulting that he was not allowed to leave. Heracles found Hades and asked him to take Cerberus to the surface. The god agreed on the condition that no weapons should be used to achieve it. Heracles managed to subdue the dog with his bare hands and brought it back to the king. Eurystheus fled in horror into his jar and asked Heracles to take the monster back to the underworld, releasing him from any further labours. With the 12 labours finally complete, Heracles had not only gained atonement for the painful act of killing his family, but cemented his name in legend as the greatest Greek hero to ever exist. There are several versions of the story as to what Heracles did next. The most common suggests he joined Jason and the Argonauts in their quest for the Golden Fleece. A mighty hero then, and a seemingly impossible quest. Heracles, or Hercules, son of Zeus and divine hero of Greek mythology. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more great stories. Cheers.